It's playoff time! Welcome to the playoffs, and it's time for the Week 15 rankings for the quarterbacks and the tight ends in this video. Then later on today, the wide receivers or running backs video will come out for the rankings for that position. In the morning, tomorrow morning, the other position will come out with a video then. Then we have a Thursday night game as normal. I will go live 2 hours prior to kickoff for any of your start-sit questions. Then things start to get a little abnormal. This Saturday, we do have 3 games. So, normally I release a rankings update video on Saturday, but obviously I'll be going live on Saturday anyways, 2 hours prior to kickoff, just as I try to always be here prior to all the kickoffs, except for Monday Night Football kickoff. To me, it seems a little odd to be available at that point in time. I think all of your decisions have been made. You know, if I'm incorrect, let me know, and I would always be happy to be available then too. But, you know, for next season. But, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do my normal rankings update video for Saturday, that's for sure. I might do one for Friday, or I might just go live Friday evening for any of your start-sit questions. And then, of course, Saturday will be live, and then Sunday, 3 hours prior to kickoff, I will be live as I always am. So that is the schedule upcoming. I know the schedule is probably going to be funky from this point forward. That's usually how it ends up going for the last part of the season. Before we get into checking out my projections, as you can see, one of them up on the screen already, and of course the order that we go through the players, my rankings, and some tiers. As always, going to recap how I did in Week 14 with my love, my fade, and with my DFS suggestions. So for the quarterback position, I decided to spend up for Dak Prescott. He was my #1 ranked quarterback last week. He cost the 8th most at $7,400. It looks like DK was right to have him priced lower because he finished 13th on the week, unfortunately. Didn't end up being a big Dak week despite being a good game for him. And then at a mid-price, I thought probably for the 3rd week in a row, Brock Purdy seemed like a good price at $6,500. Finished 6th on the week, so that worked out just fine. You could probably go for him again this week, but I didn't want to go for what I think would be 4 weeks in a row of just putting Brock Purdy up on there because he's consistently not very highly priced. Then in the bargain bin, got you Gardner Minshew at $5,400 and Baker Mayfield at $5,300. And Gardner Minshew finished 19th on the week, so that definitely was not good. Baker Mayfield, a little bit less there, finished 11th on the week. There were a fair amount of cheap options that had big games this week, so I don't know ultimately how much Baker Mayfield really helped you out compared to others. Would have been a terrible play at least. And then for my love, I had Russell Wilson as a love for me. Finished 17th at the quarterback position, so right about where I had him ranked. It didn't really come through as a love. And then I had CJ Stroud as a fade, and I mean, yes, it would have worked if you faded him. His #1 wide receiver got injured immediately, and he ended up getting injured himself later on in the game, so it's tough to really claim a victory for that fade. Let's just get right on into the projections for the wide receivers. Looking at my first tier, and there are 5 clear guys who I am just starting. Must starts here. Jalen Hurts, I have ranked #1 this week, followed by Josh Allen at 2, Dak Prescott at 3, Lamar Jackson in at 4, and Brock Purdy is my 5 to rank out. Is ranked 5th to rank up to wrap up my first tier of quarterbacks. Then let's move on to my second tier. And this is going to be kind of a smaller tier from my quarterback 6 down to my quarterback 9. You can see it's Patrick Mahomes, oh man, Jordan Love, Matt Stafford, and Justin Fields. Now, just talking about Justin Fields real quick here, he projected very, very well for me. He ended up, for my single-digit projection, he ended up ranked 5th out of all of my projections. But I think that there's a big fear of a complete bust game here going up against Cleveland. It's quite high there, so this is why I have Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Love, and Matt Stafford ranked higher than Justin Fields, even though, you know, all the projections look fine for Justin Fields. Just worried about him this game a little bit. As far as Mahomes goes, assuming that Pacheco misses the game, I think that that will force this team to pass more, the Kansas City Chiefs, of course, which works in favor of Mahomes' floor, which, despite a down season, I still trust. Then you got Jordan Love there, ranked 7th. Last week was a bad week for him. Hopefully is just a hiccup and he gets back on track. And Tampa Bay is a really good matchup, a good team for him to get back on track with. So hoping for that, thinking there's a pretty decent chance of that. And then Matt Stafford ranked there next. And there's a chance that Kyren Williams could take over this game more than Stafford does. Otherwise, I would have him ranked ahead of Love and Mahomes. Really excited about the potential this week going up against Washington. And I might end up moving him up further. But for the time being, we'll just call him a Love of the week. You can see the temperature gauge there. Very nice for him. Matchup gauge. Red is good. Blue is bad. White is neutral. As always with these projections and all these color coding that you're seeing on the screen. So, Matt Stafford, Love of the week for me. Let's move on to my third tier. We've got yet another small tier. You're kind of figuring out these quarterbacks and what we can trust, how much we can trust them and not at this point in the season. And then, of course, we have this load of quarterbacks who maybe we kind of want to trust, but we'll get to those guys, guys who aren't supposed to be starting, but they are anyways at this point in this season. And so for the third tier, I called this my tier of trust. We are going to trust that Russell Wilson, my 10th ranked quarterback, will come through in what is a smash matchup against the Detroit Lions. We're going to trust that Sam Howell, my 11th ranked quarterback, will continue to be the top 8 quarterback that he has been on the season up until this point in the season at least. And we are going to trust that my quarterback 12, Trevor Lawrence, can turn this matchup into a shootout going up against Baltimore. Not a great matchup there, but I do think that there is a chance that even without Christian Kirk, they could turn this thing into a high-scoring affair. And Trevor Lawrence hopefully would be a part of that. And then from quarterback 13 down to quarterback 19, we have my fourth tier here. We're going to call this my tier of hope. Starting off with the quarterback 13, Kyler Murray going up against San Francisco. And I hope that Kyler's athleticism can shine. That is the hope. I shouldn't say but that is the hope if you're going to end up starting Kyler Murray. That is part of the hope of where I have him ranked. And thus, I'm going to say I hope, but that's the general idea here. That Kyler's athleticism can shine, and maybe that this offense can put it together in terms of it just hasn't looked that great since Kyler's been back, and it's a really tough matchup. I don't think that we can completely expect that, and that's why I have him a tier below the rest. Then we're going to hope that Tua and Tyreek can connect deep for a couple of touchdowns. Of course, there's a little bit of concern about Tyreek and his health, and of course, it's a very tough matchup going against the New York Jets, but I do like these tougher matchups a little bit for Tua to some extent, even though you might be nervous going in because they might force this team to, have to throw all game. And although that's not always going to end up in a good game, the hope is that it could end up in one of those games where it's just not all the running backs getting all the touchdowns. Then we've got Geno Smith, and we're going to hope that if he plays, remember he is questionable at this point in time, did not play last week, but he's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, and if he plays, that he can take advantage of the single best quarterback matchup there in the Eagles. So that's the hope there for Geno Smith. Wouldn't feel too uncomfortable starting him this week for despite the season that he's had. Then at quarterback 16, we've got Jared Goff, and the hope is that he can make it happen against one of the tougher defenses in the past half of the season here against Denver. I'm not so certain about it. I'm not ultra nervous, but I am a little bit scared here, so he is a fade for me. I do believe I am a little bit fairly significantly lower than the ECR currently is on him. I believe I originally was going to put Kyler Murray as a fade, but because I was so far off from ECR on Jared Goff, he seemed like he was really truly the one that I am actually fading as far as my rankings go. So that's why he gets a fade. I do think I do have some hope against Denver this week for him. Then we've got Jake Browning in at quarterback 17, and the hope is that he can keep it going. Joe Flacco, the hope is that he can keep it going. And for Baker Mayfield, the hope is that he can do what he's done for the most part all this season, which has been a back-end, startable, streamable quarterback, ranking right around 16, 17 most weeks, somewhere in there. It won't disappoint you too bad. It is a little bit of a tough matchup for quarterbacks against Green Bay as far as the upside goes, but I think hopefully that floor is going to be safe for him. Well, I'm a Packers fan, so hopefully, I mean, he just has a terrible game. But that's going to bring us on to one of the final tiers here, and just a little bit here on some of the guys who I'm out of whack with. So this is my quarterbacks 20 through 25, Tommy DeVito, Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder, Will Levis, Zach Wilson, and Derek Carr. And I am high on DeVito because he's been pretty solid since taking over. And I think that this is about where he deserves to be ranked based on what he's done, and we have a large enough sample size to give that some sort of trust. And then I am a little bit low on Gardner Minshew compared to the ECR here, and I just don't really trust him in a matchup where I think that the defense is going to be able to get in his head. And as I'm saying that, I am remembering that there are a couple of key injuries to this Pittsburgh defense, injuries that might help Gardner Minshew not get frazzled, not overturn the ball, turn over the ball, etc. So I am going to actually just move him up right ahead of Tommy DeVito here and call it a day there for now. Then I'm also low on Derek Carr. I have him ranked 25th here, and it's because of the matchup going up against the New York Giants. It should be another Alvin Kamara day ultimately here against the Giants. Don't have much hope for the ceiling for Derek Carr really ever, and especially in this matchup, I just don't see it. So I'm going to take a shot at some of these guys and what could be bigger days in my eyes than what Derek Carr I think will get you. But if you're in a good position, he should be safe this week, you know, a safe floor type of play. And there's the rest of the quarterbacks. You can see these full rankings up at the website, www.theFF4ge.com. I'm going to transfer everything on over. We're going to start to look at the tight ends and get through that after I go over my DFS buys, so we don't forget about that. So for my quarterbacks, my DFS buys of the week here, I'm going to be spending up on Lamar Jackson this week in at least one lineup. At $7,700, he has quarterback one upside for me. You can see the projections are very, very good for him this week going up against Jacksonville there. And so I'm going to take the shot on that. It seems like a decent price to take a shot on that with compared to, you know, he's a little bit lower, like maybe 6th best price or something this week. Then for a mid-price guy, I'm going to go with Matt Stafford, my love of the week, at $6,000. That felt like a pretty good deal for a guy who I feel like I'm a little too low on here at 8. You know, so a top 6 type of quarterback for $6K, that's would end up paying off for sure. And then we're not going to go into the bargain bin this week, but I will tell you, you know, the Jake Browning, Joe Flacco, Tommy DeVito, you just want to take a shot on some of these guys, Zach Wilson, that are really, really cheap. Like, go right ahead. I don't really hate too many of them at all. I'd take those shots over Derek Carr, especially in DFS. So a lot of bargain bin options that you can go for, but what I do have for you is a contrarian play, and that's going to be Pat Mahomes at $7,800. Whether we agree with it or not, the team is absolutely pissed off. As for one reason or another, they should be too. And without Pacheco, assuming that they don't have Pacheco this week, I think that they're going to have to sling the ball around quite a bit. CEH is just not Pacheco as much as I want to like CEH. He just ain't that guy. Ultimately for Mahomes, I think it really just comes down to if the receivers can catch the ball or not. And I'll take the shot on them being able to do it for once. And I don't think many will. So for that price, I think a lot of people will be overlooking them. And I like it to differentiate your lineup from the rest. Now let's move on to the tight ends. But before we can actually cover the tight ends, we need to do a little recap for how I did with my DFS buys last week for the tight ends and my love and my fade. Starting off with the DFS buys, I thought that Jake Ferguson at $4,400 was a good buy. He finished 9th on the week, so he did all right. Probably was a bit of a value there for you. And in the discount bin, I said if there was ever a week that Chigoziem Okonkwo to have a big week, basically, that this could be it. So for $3,000, I'll take a shot on that in a lineup at least. He finished in a 4-way tie at 17th. You know, not enough there. Contrarian play, I gave you Taysom Hill at $5,400. He did not end up playing. He got injured throughout the week, whatever. Yeah, he was out. It said or Sam Laporta, so goodbye me. You know, we took a couple of shots here at it, just in case somebody wasn't playing. At $6,100, Sam Laporta finished 31st on the week, so it doesn't really matter what you spent on him, but for $6,100, that probably tanked your lineup a little bit there, so that did not go so well. Bad contrarian play. And so everybody was correct to not be playing him. Then for a love of the week last week, I had Cole Kmet. He finished tied for 11th place with 9.1 fantasy points. So I think that was pretty solid, probably right around where I had him ranked. I might have him ranked a little bit higher than that. And then for my fade, I gave you Dalton Kincaid, finished 29th on the week. So that ended up being a good fade. Let's move on to the actual rankings here for Week 15. Starting off with my first tier, which of course, oh gosh, everything just disappeared off my screen there. Is going to be these top 4 guys here. Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkins, Sam Laporta, George Kittle. You're starting them if you got them this week, no doubt. So let's move on to my second tier. I don't think I need to explain why you're starting those guys if you have them. And my second tier is going to go from tight end 5 to tight end 10. Starts off with Evan Ingram, followed by Trey McBride, David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid, and Cole Kmet. They're at 10th again this week. I don't know if he was ranked 10th last week, but, you know, still have him ranked fairly well. So when we look at Evan Ingram, Trey McBride, they're going up against the Baltimore defense and the San Francisco 49ers defense, which are both rough tight end matchups. But I don't think that you can afford to fade either of them this week. I'm not fading either of them this week. It was very tempting to fade McBride, came very close to it, but if Arizona is going to make this a game, then it's almost certainly going to include a heavy dose of Trey McBride. And so I do think that, it's worth taking that shot there if you are relying on Trey McBride over most options, unless, of course, you're looking at some of these guys that I have ranked ahead of him, or you just got a gut feeling for some of these other guys in this tier over him that you also have. At tight end 7, I've got David Njoku going up against the Chicago Bears, and it's just an average tight end matchup. It's not that it's a fantastic matchup, but Joe Flacco is seemingly the best quarterback that Cleveland has had all season long, and Njoku has been Mr. Reliable for all of the quarterbacks, and you combine those two things together, and you got a week like last week, which is an absolute pop week for David Njoku, and I still like his floor, and I think we saw that there's a better chance of him hitting the ceiling as well with Joe Flacco. So he is the love of the week for me in this matchup against Chicago. In part it just came down to I felt like I should have had him ranked a little bit higher than this, even because I am a little nervous for these guys. That's part of the reason why you got the love for me this week. So let's move on to my tight end 8, Jake Ferguson, going up against the Buffalo Bills, who have done quite well against tight ends. Pretty well. Quite might even be a bit of a strong word. But I do think that there's still plenty of upside in this matchup. Dallas versus Buffalo, you got to imagine that's going to be most likely one of the higher scoring games of the week. We shall see how that ends up turning out. But that's what you expect coming into the game. And so on the other side of the ball, we've got Dalton Kincaid, and he was still targeted quite heavily with Dawson Knox returning, so that's a great sign. His ceiling is less so than it was without having Dawson Knox out there, but his floor apparently seems to be intact. Once again, it was targeted quite heavily last week, so I hope that can continue for him, and if so, you can continue to play him. So for now, we're going to keep him in this top 10. And Cole Kmet ranked 10th, and it's a really tough tight end matchup going up against Cleveland this week, but he is still the number 2 target for Fields, so I think another guy with a fairly safe floor here, but tough to expect a great game from him in this tougher matchup. Then I've got a little tier from tight end 11 through 14, Isaiah Likely, Dallas Goedert, Logan Thomas, and Kyle Pitts to fill out that tier. And as far as Likely goes, it's a plus tight end matchup going up against Jacksonville. I still don't fully trust Isaiah Likely, otherwise he would at least not be in this tier and be, along in this tier, but I do still have some concerns surrounding him. But it's easy to play him after last week, and given the matchup. That combination says, yeah, let's give him another shot regardless of how comfortable with it you do or do not feel, regardless of how that floor looks there. Dallas Goedert going up against Seattle this week. It's a decent matchup. He is one more week removed from his injury, so I think that should, help to get him a little bit more involved even than he was last week. And I don't foresee that this offense will be struggling too terribly much against Seattle, so I'm going to take a shot on Dallas Goedert, thinking that they're going to have some shots in the red zone where he could come through for you with a touchdown. Then Logan Thomas in at tight end 13, and it's one of the best tight end matchups that there is in the entire league going up against Los Angeles Rams. They've allowed the third most points to the tight end position in half PPR on the season on average per week. At this point, everybody's had their bye, so they've just, I don't need to say on average per week anymore. That's just a fact that they've allowed the third most points. And he is a top 15 tight end on the season via my EV system. Equalized value is basically like average points per week, except it takes consistency into a factor. So I think this is a very good opportunity for Logan Thomas, one of those weeks where you'll put him out there and there's a decent chance that he'll pay off for you. Hopefully. Kyle Pitts in at tight end 14, and Carolina, the opponent there, is not a high upside matchup for most receivers, and that includes tight ends who catch the ball, which would be somebody like Kyle Pitts. So I don't have a whole lot of hope for a ceiling from Kyle Pitts this week, but he has been a top 10 tight end this season, once again via EV. So I'll just give him a shot over the rest of the tight ends that I have ranked here on this week. But obviously, we're not going to be like super confident about it. It's Kyle Pitts. Which is a weird thing to say given, the hype around him not too long ago. Then we've got my tight ends 15 through 23, a little larger tier here, and I really ended up breaking. I wanted to make a bigger tier, but I knew I had to find a breakoff point. So these next two tiers, not a huge separation between the two in my eyes, but at this point for this tier, I would just go with your gut here. Just trust whatever your gut tells you, or you can come in and see how I have them ranked and go with my gut. But, well, I mean, there's more than just my gut that's gone into these rankings, but still, whoever you feel comfortable with, if you don't like how I have them ranked, you like somebody else over whoever, just go for it. Like, I have Chico Conkwell on my team already. I have Tyler Conklin ranked higher. He's available on the waiver wire. Don't think I'm going to end up bothering going and picking up Tyler Conklin. I think I'm just going to take the shot at the ceiling for Chig because I'm in a 2-week matchup. I'm behind by a little ways against my opponent. I need a ceiling, so I'm just going to ride Chig out and hope that he could somehow give me a good day in a really good matchup against Houston. But we're not going to sit here and talk about all of these guys. We are going to, of course, talk about my fade here, Hunter Henry going up against Kansas City. He is the EV tight end 20 on the season. That's not terrible, but that's definitely not good either. He has been mostly non-existent outside of a few big games that he's had this season. So I just wanted to remind you and dissuade you from just blindly chasing that 2-touchdown week from last week that he had. He's done this before on the season and then get you a goose egg the next week. Going up against Kansas City, there is some upside in that matchup, so I do still have him ranked 18th on the week, but be careful who you're starting him over, and feel free, if you like some of these guys more than him, to just go right ahead and do it. And then I'll show you the final tier here. Well, there's a couple of tiers. And here's the guys that aren't being ranked. Dalton Schultz, Darren Waller, Hayden Hurst, Taysom Hill, Tyler Higbee are not currently ranked. So obviously that would change some things in my rankings. And then you can see how I broke down this last couple of groups. I'm still pretty cool with these guys in this tier if you're in a deeper league or something like that. Whatever the case, having to choose from them. But hopefully you're not picking from any of these guys and having to use one of these 4, is that down there? And let's see, we can finish this off with my DFS buys of the week for the tight end position. I think that David Njoku at $4,700 is a good buy. Go for it. In the discount bin, we're going to take Logan Thomas at $3,700. He's probably been featured in this section plenty of times this season. And on the contrarian basis here, as a contrarian play, I think that Trey McBride at $5,200 is going to be overlooked due to a bad matchup. It's not pretty. I said I wanted to have him ranked lower. I expressed some concerns when talking about him going up against San Francisco, but at the same time, I do think that there is this upside with how much he does tend to get targeted usually for him to have a big day. And at $5,200, not too expensive, that I think he could pay off for you, and not too many other people will have him. So could differentiate your lineup. Like I said, there you go. That is it for the quarterbacks, for the tight ends rankings. Once again, but just thank you for everything. I appreciate you guys. I love you, and peace out.